I call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, December 8th, and the time is 6 p.m. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the district website as soon as possible. Welcome members of our community here tonight to observe the important work being done on behalf of all school district stakeholders. Dr. Hillman, will you update us on the table file?
Yes, there are a few items in the table file this evening. First, you have the 25-26 Superintendent Focus Area Update number 1 in the new format that the board requested. We have the consent agenda with some appointments, some increase, decrease, and change of assignment. We have a couple of leaves of absence, and we also have the December 2025 enrollment report. So that is the table file for this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there a motion to accept the agenda as presented? Okay, moved by Jeff, second. Thank you, Amy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. We're now on to public comment, and I will read two guidelines for our public comment tonight. One is for our Truth and Taxation meeting, which is happening tonight. Tonight, we have two opportunities for public comment. In conjunction with our regular school board meeting, we have the Truth in Taxation public hearing. At this time, those who have signed up to make public comment at this regular meeting, we will have the presentation first, and then I will invite you to come up and speak. After the Truth in Taxation presentation, Northfield School District taxpayers will have an opportunity to ask questions or make comments regarding the Truth in Taxation public hearing presentation. Robert Rules of Order is used to govern the conduct of this meeting. Now I'll explain the public comment guidelines. This is an opportunity for residents, business, and/or property owners, parents, guardians, caregivers, students, and employees of the Northfield School District to address the board. All comments to the board must adhere to the guidelines set in place by District Policy 206 regarding public comment. This is not a time to debate an issue, but only for the board to hear your comments. You're prohibited from making comments about specific students, staff, or administrators. The board respects and values input, but when it relates to a specific individual or a specific matter, this input must be heard by the appropriate personnel, including the building principal or superintendent, and not during an open meeting of the school board. You will be gavelled out of order if your comments are not in compliance with these guidelines. Please address the board from the podium. After being recognized by the chair, identify yourself and if you represent a group. We require that you limit your remarks to 3 minutes. You're not allowed to yield your time to another person. It is expected that members of the public will address their remarks with civility and respect. Personal attacks by anyone addressing the board are unacceptable. The board has allotted up to a total of 30 minutes for public comment at regular school board meetings. Kelly, do we have anybody signed up for either this time? Okay. And we will move on to item A about items for discussion and reports. That is our presentation, Truth in Taxation. Oh, yes, sorry, I skipped over announcements.
We have two announcements this evening. We just want to invite the public and, of course, the board to join the Northfield High School chorus or choral ensembles for the annual Traditions Winter Concert. This year, the theme is Love Will Guide Us. The performances are Saturday, December 13th at 7:30 p.m. or Sunday, December 14th at 2 p.m. And this annual Traditions Concert takes place at the Skinner Memorial Chapel on the Carleton College campus. And it's one of those examples of our partnerships with our two local colleges. Wonderful environment for this high school choir concert. So we invite the board and the public to attend. And we also want to invite the public to the Northfield Middle and High School Orchestras concerts that will be on Monday, December 15th. That begins at 6 p.m. in the Northfield Middle School Auditorium. There's no admission charged for this particular performance, but we are asking, the orchestras are asking that non-perishable food or monetary donations be made to the Northfield food shelf at the concert. So they'll have a place to collect canned goods, and they'll also take donations for the food shelf. So those are your announcements for this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Board members, do you have anything to add to item 4 announcements and recognitions?
Everyone.
Maggie?
Speaking of choral excellence, I attended the St. Olaf Christmas Festival and just wanted to say that I saw many NHS graduates in the orchestra and in the choirs, and it was just a really delight to see them all.
Excellent. Okay, now we're on to items for discussion and reports. And first, we have truth in taxation presentation for the payable 2026 property tax levy. That final certified levy for 2026 is 27,468,778 and 21 cents, representing a 0.98% decrease from the prior year. Welcome, Val.
Thank you. So tonight I'm going to talk about our final certified levy. We'll see if my presentation comes up. Perfect. So as you know, we like to start every presentation with our vision and our strategic plan. So we prepare every student for lifelong success by developing critical thinkers who are curious and ready to engage in our society. Obviously, stewardship is the primary strategic commitment that my department has a lens on. And this is one of our largest components of revenue. This is about 26% of our general fund revenue. So it's a very important part of providing the resources to do good things for kids. So in terms of the levy cycle, just to make sure everyone's familiar with how the process works, typically in the spring, you will get your estimated property tax value that will actually be for the coming calendar year. So there's a lot of confusion about this. To actually appeal your estimated market value is in the spring for the following calendar year. So what happens in September, we certified the preliminary levy, and that was just our initial estimate based on the Department of Education's formulas and statutory requirements. We submitted that to our county auditor. We do have land in 3 separate counties. So we participate with Rice County, Dakota County, and Goodhue County. Rice County is obviously our county seat and the largest portion of our levy. They take all of that information from their taxing jurisdictions and then calculate that based on the tax rates and then provide the initial statements that you probably received in the last several weeks. And then the final step of this process is the final certification. So the preliminary levy is the max that we can charge unless there is a voter approved change. We did not have one this year, so our preliminary levy is actually the exact same as our final certified levy this year. And so once we get all the final amounts, again, we certify that to the Department of Education, to the counties, and then they will do all the final calculations and then submit your final tax statements for next calendar year. So in terms of legislative impact, I think it's very important to highlight how different a school district levy is compared to other taxing jurisdictions. So school funding is highly regulated by the state. All of our formulas are basically statutorily calculated, whether it's an enrollment input, over 70% of the formulas are enrollment driven. All of those are authorized by the legislature or voter approved. So there's maybe one levy that I can think of where we can enter a dollar amount. Otherwise, they're all calculated by statutory formulas with specific inputs, typically enrollment. So we do not have the same authority as other government agencies to say our budget's going up 6%, and so we're going to increase our revenue 6%. That is not how ours works. And then some other things that can impact your property tax changes. Obviously, voter approved referendums is a large one for our particular levy. Changes in enrollment, with 70% of those formulas being enrollment driven. You'll see that ours is a 0.98% decrease, and that is because we're experiencing declining enrollment. So those go hand in hand. The levy process can include adjustments for up to 3 prior levy cycles. So there can be some kind of flux for those items. Legislative changes, obviously, if the legislature is making statutory changes, that could impact it. Changes in market values is the other large impact. You'll see that chart on the right. 23 and 22, we had some really significant market growth across our tax base, and that has slowed for 24. This data is all a year behind just because of the way the calculations work. And so we went from 15.6 and 11.7 to a 4.2% increase, which again is the lowest we've seen for several years. And so that can impact the way our total levy is charged against the total tax base. And then obviously levies by other taxing jurisdictions will impact your property tax statement. So the one thing that I want to make sure people understand is that our certified levy, we certify a dollar amount. So regardless of whether our tax base is increasing, decreasing, or staying the same, it's $1 amount. Our amount that we levy doesn't change based on that market value increase or decrease. So we certify the dollar amount, and then that is spread over the tax base that we have. Obviously, based on that last slide, our tax base is increasing slightly, and that is either due to market value increases or market value additions to our tax base. But either way, the dollar amount, the 27 million that we're talking about, is spread over that value. The other thing that I think is important to clarify, which I don't have on a slide here, but I should add for next year, is that our total levy is certified across the school district's tax base. So it is not over just the city of Northfield. It covers Northfield and Dundas, as well as 9 or 10 or 15 townships. I don't know if you guys know the exact number, but several townships across about 174 square miles. So that is spread out. It is not concentrated just here in Northfield. And so in terms of the levy, what does it do for the district? As I said at the start, it does provide about 26% of our general fund budget. That is a pretty substantial portion. We also do levy the revenue to pay our debt service obligations. So any bonds that we have outstanding to pay for the Reimagine Northfield High School or other past projects that we've completed, a portion of the levy goes to our debt service fund to support those payments. Again, required by statute. It does include voter-approved levies as well as state-authorized levies. Again, very little in between. And it really does support the gap of the chronic underfunding from the state. So as we've said ad nauseum, the state has not kept pace with inflation on most any of the formulas that we receive. That in combination with declining enrollment has been a real challenge for our district financially to navigate. But our voters have really stepped up and filled that gap. And so if you look at the amount that we get for our referendum, the voter approved referendum, it is almost identical to the amount we calculate the state underfunding to be. And really it just allows us to provide the world-class programming for every student that we strive for every day. So in total, our overall levy authority is down about 271,000 or 0.98%. Again, primarily due to declining enrollment. And as I mentioned, the preliminary and final were exactly the same. There were no changes. So in terms of that 27,468,778.21, you can see kind of how this breaks out. So the debt service fund is about 33%. Again, that's a separate fund, separate from the general fund, that is solely for paying our debt service obligations. And that is, we're required to levy 105% of our total expected bond payments for the next year. The referendum is the other 33%, the other large chunk, and that is part of our general fund, and that is voter approved. General fund other is the state authorized levies. So those include things like local optional revenue, operating capital, long-term facility maintenance, those types of things. Capital is 8%. That is our voter approved capital projects levy. And so you might recall a few years ago that was also increased by the voters. And then community services has about 2%. They have a few statutory requirements to levy for ECFE and home services and things like that. So some things specific to support that fund. Again, community services is its own operating fund. And so these are just some different ways to look at our total $27 million levy. The first is just by fund. So 17.8 million of that is for the general fund, about 655,000 for community ed, and about 8.9 million for debt service. And you will see, again, there's increases and decreases. General fund is primarily related to declining enrollment. There's a little more detailed breakout on the coming slide, so I'll get into that. The increase for community ed is primarily related to, they have some statutory formulas that are tied to the same increase for the basic formula. So there's some built-in increases there. And then there's also a levy that is specific to support student-specific needs at school-age care or after-school programming. And we do have some upcoming needs that are going to increase that a little bit. And then debt service went down. Again, the pay 25 was the big jump, adding the Reimagine Northfield High School bond in there. That was like a 26% increase last year. The decrease is really related to the debt service excess. So because we're levying 105% each year, that 5% builds up. And the Department of Education does a kind of 3-year historical look. And when our fund balance exceeds an amount where we have enough to pay our debt for the next 3 years, they take some of that money back. And so then it basically goes back to the taxpayers and we're levying less because they've already paid that much to us. And so that is, again, the debt service is really solely focused on providing money back to the taxpayers. That's not something that comes back to the district directly. And then in terms of by category, voter approved or other, I really enjoy sharing this particular breakout. 73% of our levy is voter approved, which is pretty phenomenal when you consider a $27 million local levy. So we have an incredibly generous and supportive community. And then the other, again, are those state authorized levies. And then referendum by tax base, referendum market value is really our operating referendum for the most part. And then the net tax capacity is all the other levies. The difference there really being the way agricultural properties are taxed. For a referendum, it is your house in 1 acre and not all of your acreage, but for everything else, it includes all of your acreage. So that's the difference in those calculations. So this is the breakout that you can see a little bit more detail on the general fund specifically. The referendum is obviously the largest portion of that, about 8.9 million. And again, we have the voter approved inflationary increase each year. And so that's why it went up 29,000. So even though we had declining enrollment, we had a slight inflationary factor that the state calculates. So we did net a slight positive in that formula. The capital projects levy, again, that is a percentage of our total tax base. That's the way that question is written and the way the state calculates that. So that will likely increase slightly each year based on our market value, assuming that overall market value continues to increase. The other post-employment benefits you'll see is a negative 111,000. That's one of the bigger ones. And that was really, pay 25 was higher due to a significant teacher severance year. We had several teachers retire. We had about 430,000 in severance payments that year, which is all levy eligible per our contract. And so that's really just coming back down into a normal range again. And then the adjustments are the other kind of big decrease, that 284,000. Again, that's over a 3-year span, so it can include any number of things. But really what happened in Pay 25 was a final cleanup of our enrollment from the pandemic. So from like 2022, We had very conservative enrollment estimates because we were unsure during the pandemic how many students would stay with us or would choose something else based on protocols and all kinds of other options they had at that time. And we actually ended up keeping more students than anticipated. So we had a pretty big adjustment on our Pay 25 levy, cleaning up that disconnect. But we do try, obviously, to have very close enrollment estimates for obvious reasons. And so that's a little more stabilized in the Pay 26 levy. And then again, we talked about community ed and debt service. So overall, about 271,000 less, or 0.98% decrease. And then I think it's important just to share the context of the history. So this is just the last 5 years. You'll see that Pay 25 was the Reimagine Northfield High School bond. All 3 questions were passed. Our net increase or our average increase for the last 5 years is about 6.7%. We've had, I don't have the 6th year on here, but 3 of the last 6 years were actually decreases. Again, really driving from that declining enrollment. And I believe Pay 23, nope, Pay 24, that increase in the general fund was related to the increased capital projects levy, but that was offset by the decrease in debt service. So overall, an average of 6.7 over 5 years, but for next year, a 0.98% decrease. And I neglected to include the estimate from Ellers in my slideshow and my narrative, so I apologize for that. But it has not changed since the preliminary, since the numbers were all the same. Ellers estimated an average decrease of about 4.5% for taxpayers, specifically on their school district taxes. And that is assuming that their market value stayed the same. Obviously, we know that's not usually the case, but another way to look at that is you could have your property value increase roughly 4.5%, and you would still be paying the same amount in school district taxes. So overall, I think that's positive for our taxpayers. As we continue to look forward, it's pretty stable for the district to continue programming. Another component of the truth in taxation is a requirement to talk about our budgets. Typically, we have taken this opportunity to revise the general fund budget. We are just in a different place this year with where we're at with our negotiations process and our audit process. And so we're just talking in general about our adopted budget. I did update our beginning fund balances based on the audit results that you're going to hear in a little while. So the projected fund balances are updated from what you saw in the spring. But we will, I'll be presenting probably the first meeting in January, revised budget and an updated financial forecast based on all of the updated information we're getting in a short period of time here. So just wanted to call that out, that this is a little different than what I've done historically. So in terms of the general fund, current beginning fund balances of just over 17 million. And we're projecting 69 million of revenues and about 67.8 million of expenditures. So looking for a net surplus. Again, that is primarily related to the very hard work that 80 plus people, staff, community members, students participated in that priority-based budget reduction process last year to make sure that we have a balanced budget that can support and provide some stabilized programming for staff over the next couple of years. And so projecting that fund balance to grow. And then child nutrition, again, this one has been a little trickier to project with the transition to free breakfast and lunch paid through the state. We have been getting the reimbursement rates late, all those kinds of things. The participation the last 2 years has been incredibly stable. So I think that will help as we have data now moving forward. We saw an enormous jump in participation the first year of that program, and now it's been pretty stable. So we can anticipate that moving forward. But food costs are also a large concern with that fund. So projecting to spend down. Again, you'll hear this with the audit presentation, but in fiscal 25, we did better than projected. So we're hopeful we'll do better than what the adopted budget says, but we're monitoring that pretty closely. Community Ed is in a similar model. Both of those funds are kind of self-sustaining, acting sort of like their own business model, if that makes sense. And so that is a fund that we've been working on for several years to make sure we're offering balanced programming and with revenues and expenditures, and having some particular challenges in that fund, but still a strong fund balance. This is also a fund that operates at a much higher level than most other school districts. We have a wide and robust variety of programming here. So again, both ending at about 400,000, still strong. Just always keeping an eye on it to make sure we can keep it that way. The construction fund is obviously new to the reports that you're seeing based on our Reimagine Northfield High School bond. And so our initial revenue for fiscal 26 is really just the additional, actually, I think that's interest. We did get the second $1 million donation from Carleton, which I think we were actually expecting a little bit later with our second bond issue in 27. So we'll probably revise that budget because we did get that already. But really just some interest revenue on that fund. And then the construction expenditures are just what we're expecting, still mostly architect and kind of initial stuff, since construction doesn't really start till June of 26. And then debt service, again, is pretty straightforward. Levy and state aid in, bond payments out. So that's a pretty stable fund. And then our internal service fund is our self-insured health and dental. And that has been, this is the second budget in a row expecting growth, which means that we've stabilized somewhat our self-insured health insurance. So our premiums are at a rate and we're maintaining them at a rate that is actually covering the costs to make sure that we're keeping that adequate fund balance to cover all of the potentially unexpected items that can come with that. But overall, all the funds are ending positive, strong. And so I'm excited to do the revised budget and get the updated financial forecast to see how this all plays together. But you can see the budget resources is just kind of the breakout of all of the funds revenue and how they play together. And the budget expenditures is pretty similar. So that was a lot of me talking. So are we doing questions first or public comment first?
Well, nobody signed up for public comment.
Or that. So if the board has any questions, I will gladly answer them.
Thank you for your presentation, for putting that together, and also echo thanks to our generous community. Board members, do you have any comments or questions? Okay, Amy?
Well, Val, thank you for the very clear presentation. That's a lot of numbers and a lot of things that you've organized in a very straightforward fashion to answer, sort of preempt many questions we might have. So I appreciate that. But one of the questions I have is, could you remind me about the Safe School Fund and what that's used for?
Sure. Yep. So we have an allocation. We get about $142,000 each year. Again, an enrollment-based formula. Surprise, surprise. We can use that for a couple of things. It's primarily paying for the contract with for the school resource officer, and we use it to pay for our cybersecurity program. So we contract with Arctic Wolf to they do a very comprehensive network safety checks, making sure that everything's secure, so they won't have any breaches. That gets included in there. There's some funding for supporting some counselors and some chemical health dependency things. And we've done, we paid for some vape detectors out of there. The training that we went to in August for the I Love You Guys Foundation, we paid for some staff time out of there to support that training. Just really kind of broad safe schools type things. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it sounds like you get a lot for because that's really a very small bit of money, and you've
Yes.
managed to really make it do a lot of things. So,
We try to,
all right,
yes.
thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Ben?
Yeah, thanks, Val, and appreciate the presentation. Also, to echo the fact that obviously the community came together last spring and made some hard choices that I think result, in part because of your leadership and Dr. Hillman's and a good financial report. I think one of the core functions of this board is to make sure that we've got long-term financial viability and health for the district. So this is all encouraging to see, and I know we'll get some good results as part of the audit this evening as well. I'm wondering if you could just flip back up 2 slides, that levy trend. There you go.
Yep.
Maybe you knew where I was going to ask. When we see that big jump in 25, obviously that was like 26.5%. That was when the referendum hit kind of the property tax rolls, right? I mean, that was what really drove that big increase. I think, as I understand it, and this came up during our finance committee meeting last week, was
Yes.
Ellers, who's the financial advisor group that we work with, the way that they structured kind of that debt and those payments that have spread that out, even though we have 2 bond sales, we've sold 1 round of bonds, then the next one's in 27. But if everything else was sort of held constant, right, people's property values didn't go up, et cetera, we've sort of already accounted for that, that period of bonding over the life of those bonds, correct? So
Yes.
taxpayers shouldn't expect, again, all things being equal, a big jump in the future, because I think that might be a
Correct.
question folks have.
Yep. The 26% was the anticipated and what we shared with the community during our campaign. That was the expected increase for that for the bonds. And we do have the ability to structure our bonds in a way where our principal and interest payments can vary from year to year. And so we're making the bond that we issued, I think, is 23 years instead of 27 or something like that. But we're making some initial large principal payments. But that increase is the only increase we're expecting. It encompasses what we're expecting for the second bond issue, for the full up to 30 years that we have authority to bond for. So yes, your statement is correct. They should not expect an additional increase, all things held the same.
Yeah, so people could think it's not a direct or perfect analogy, but kind of like when you get a mortgage, like what your principal and interest are going to be. We structured that kind of in a similar manner.
Yes.
Predictable over the life of.
Yes, we try really hard to make sure that the tax rate, which is what actually gets calculated against their taxable market value, is as similar as possible from year to year, because we don't want giant swings either way for taxpayers when we really have the ability to manage that internally.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Anyone else at this time? All right, thank you, Val.
All right, thank you.
Okay, item B is the 25-26 Superintendent Focus Area Update number 1.
Yes, so in the table file today, we had the mid-year evaluation. So it's the first update of my superintendent goals for the year. Let's see if I can project here. So in the packet, you can see those updates using the new format that the board subcommittee had put together and the board approved. So you'll notice it's a little bit more streamlined than it's been in previous years, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that people have. So when we take a look at the first area really around the school to work program, that's been a multi-year goal. And so we worked on getting some of the infrastructure in place last year. And so what you'll see is that we will have a total of, it's actually going to end up being a total of 6 teachers after this round. There are 3 teachers who are currently enrolled in what's called the Work-Based Learning Endorsement Program. That's a discounted program through the Lakes Country Service Cooperative. And so we're very excited to have those three teachers part of that. In order to be able to get the endorsement, you have to have a regular teaching license. You go through this particular program and you get another endorsements and really an add-on to your license. And so we are looking at creating a cadre of licensed people who have this endorsement so that we can create an infrastructure that can maintain the school to work over the next several years and adjust to different FTE changes that we have as a result in declining enrollment. So rather than just putting all of our eggs in one basket, we're really trying to have multiple people. We already have a couple of people who focus on the existing special education school to work or work-based learning program. And we're really trying to grow the general education work-based learning program. We also have courses in order to be able to receive the CTE funding. We have to have the courses approved, and we already have the course program approval from MDE right in as of now. And then we've worked with the high school counseling department. They have a course description that's been developed that's going to be included in the registration guide for the 26-27 school year. So we are on the right track there. Now, one of the things that I thought about putting in the challenges area, it's really about expand. We already have a number of relationships with businesses in the community because of the special education work-based learning program. But as we move to a more general education-based program, in addition to what we already have, we're going to need to continue to develop those relationships and create new partnerships with new businesses. One of the reasons that we really think this is a positive pathway for Northfield is that we don't have one single industry within our community. And if we're really about helping prepare every student for lifelong success, the vision would be that we could create partnerships with multiple businesses in the community, depending on where students' interests are and what work they may be doing. And so we're excited about the progress that we've made. We're in progress. We believe we're on track for that particular goal. Focus area 2 is around really supporting the necessary system adaptations based on the priority-based budget reductions from last year. And I would say we're still learning what do we have to adapt to. We're about a third of the way through the school year. I think everyone within the district pulled together to say, you know what? Yep, we have fewer resources, but we're going to keep doing good things for kids. And I think as we started, everyone gave it a really great effort. And right now, I think we're starting to see some of those places where we need to adapt. And so I've listed several things in the update, including it's the superintendent's office calendar is really an important piece about how we spend our time. And we've already adapted that calendar twice to adapt to some of the new responsibilities, specifically for coaching leaders and managing instructional services, the instructional services department. We have also really worked with the instructional services staff. Of course, we did not replace the retiring instructional services director, and I'm overseeing that department. That staff is doing a fantastic job. They've divided out the weekly PLC management and scheduling responsibilities. So that's an example of an adaptation. You're seeing that we've adjusted some of the district office responsibilities. So, something that might have lived in human resources before may now have come to the superintendent's office, or something that had been in technology services before may be combined with another position. So there's some of those work that we're doing. How can we distribute the workload effectively within the district office? Additionally, one of the big things I've been doing is trying to help, especially our leaders and staff, adapt to different workflows. So when we had more people, more human resources in a place in the past, and there's fewer, and thinking, okay, this is how we used to do that. How are we going to do this moving forward? Really coaching through the steps of saying, okay, how do we adapt our workflow so that we can be efficient, continue to accomplish the things that have to be accomplished in a different way. We're continuing to work on developing deeper relationships with St. Olaf and Carleton colleges. So, for example, St. Olaf is serving as the third party for our district's employee experience and parent and caregiver surveys this year. We're just about ready to launch the employee experience survey. I want to thank Professor Chris Chapp and the team up there, Alyssa Herzog-Melby, who's been really great in helping us through those pieces, and continue to work with Carleton College in similar ways that you'll see more of that in the second semester. One of the things responding to feedback that we had from staff and thinking about, again, different level of resources and bringing parent-teacher conferences back, we did make a change. In the last several years, we've been doing a formal report card at the end of each quarter because we had a different structure for parent-teacher conferences. Since parent-teacher conferences were back to what I consider a more traditional approach, we were able to take that really robust report card work that has to happen at the end of each quarter and adapt that to a district printed progress report through our new EduClimber system. So that gave the data that the teachers needed to use with families during parent-teacher conferences without the laborious process of the report card. Report cards will still happen at the end of the first semester and at the end of the second semester. This actually goes back to what we had done before. We had shifted just after COVID. So there's just a few of the examples that we're working through. I will say, I've shared before that we rounded with over 240 staff members. So rounding is when a leader has an intentional sit-down conversation with an employee about how are things going, what's going well, what could be improved. Do you have all the tools and resources to do your job? We use that as an employee recognition time as well. And when we got together with our administrators across all of the rounding sessions, workload was the most often identified area for improvement, which stands to reason. And so we want to call that out. We want to acknowledge that and say that we're continuing to work to adapt. So you'll also have seen we've done some things like making a recommendation to you to increase the FTE of the high school dean of students. That's an example of how we're adapting as well. The third area is really around developing an artificial intelligence development academy that we are preparing to launch second semester. It might sound interesting, but actually finding the dates is one of the more challenging parts of the whole process. So we do have the dates set and the space is reserved, and we plan to send our recruitment message to staff this week. We have space for around 20 staff members to be part of this first Northfield School District Artificial Intelligence Development Academy. Again, this is focused on school staff to help create a cadre of experts, or as expert as you can be with AI, so that we can work throughout the system. We're not saying this is directly with students yet. We're saying that this is about creating staff capacity. The fourth area was around enrollment. And so again, we have contracted with Teamworks. They are a consulting company in Minnesota, do a different kind of enrollment analysis than what we've had in the past. So we're just getting started with that. We have a partnership with a J-term class at St. Olaf College. We're conducting focus groups of district residents around those folks who are choosing their Northfield district residents who are choosing another traditional public school district, working with Dana Gross and her J-term team at St. Olaf College. So that's exciting. We're getting ready to launch that later this week and start recruiting people to participate in those focus groups. And then I added this in this area, even though it doesn't necessarily go to the study component, but one of the things that we're also asking ourselves is, what is something different that we could explore that would continue to help set Northfield apart from other districts? Things like the ag program, right, have done that recently. So I did take a team, three of us, a high school principal, Chris Dibble, instructional services specialist, Michelle Bauer, and I went and looked at the Minnetonka Public Schools aviation program last week. We believe there's 2 or 3 aviation programs in the state. We know that there is a large airline community within Northfield, pilots who live here. We know that we have a number of air traffic controllers who live here. We have the Stanton Airfield not too far, and we've learned quite a bit. We've had a visit at Minnetonka to actually see their program, the simulator, super cool, really interesting, very engaging for students. And then also have talked with a Northfielder who really helped develop and coach in the Eden Prairie program. So while this isn't directly related to the goal, I wanted to share with you, we're not just relating to that. We're also looking at what are our other ways, and very preliminary. This is learning work. Like, we'd be years out from any kind of program. And I'm sharing with you that we're looking at other ways that we can differentiate ourselves and make us the district of choice in this area. And the final focus area, which I've had for several years now, is making sure to lift up voices to make sure that we're improving our BIPOC students' experiences and feelings of belonging. Of course, these committees are open to any parent, but the topic of discussion is really about how do we support our BIPOC students and the experiences and how they feel a part of our district. And so we have held our first Hispanic Parent Advisory Committee. Interestingly enough, this is the 10th year that we have been hosting the Hispanic Parent Advisory Committee. And so really, I was reflecting on that. I thought it's just been a very good way for us to be able to connect with our Spanish-speaking parents specifically, and how we're able to lift up their voice and make sure that their input is part of our decision-making process as well. Our Indigenous Parent Advisory Committee has met twice already, scheduled to meet 2 more times this year. And the Black Parent Advisory Committee is going to start meeting actually on Dr. King's birthday, and they'll culminate with the Juneteenth activity, the 3rd annual Juneteenth activity in June of 2026. Also added just a few other areas that we have been working on, some other feedback groups. So we just completed 4 meetings of the Compañeros Community Work Group. And then in February, we'll be launching a work group and start recruiting that probably right after the first of the year, for people to give us some feedback about the middle school schedule outside of the pressure of the budget reduction process. We know there was a lot of energy around what should the middle school experience look like. And we want to be able to capture that and say, okay, here's what's next for our middle school. And then, of course, later this evening, I'll also highlight the board's upcoming discussion about possibility of shifting middle school and high school start times later. We're just getting started, with that discussion, and again, suggesting not even thinking about any changes till 2029. So those are the focus areas. Be happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Board members, do you have any questions at this point? Okay, Amy.
Thank you for using our new form, and I appreciate your condensing these very big areas down into a few salient sentences. But as I was reading the abbreviated versions of it and hearing you talk, I was realizing that there's a lot that you weren't able to put into those sentences. And I'm wondering if you feel like you've been able to give us enough information. I mean, you just covered it. I can assure you all, you will go back and listen to it again because there was a lot before I fill out my side of the form. But do you feel like there's any other written information you'd want to give us, or are you happy to go ahead with this, and also having been here at the meeting and all the information you've relayed verbally?
Yeah, well, I think what is fair is to give the entire, this was as a trial, right? So this is the first different mid-year evaluation report. So I think it would be fair to give it an entire sequence to see, did it meet everybody's needs? At the end of the day, what it is the board needs to have enough information to provide me feedback. It's not a rating this time. And so I think we should collectively reflect afterwards. I think that there's, this is really a synopsis, right? There's been a number of other reports to the board over time that you could also consider as part of your feedback. So I appreciate, really kind of streamlining it a bit and want to make sure you have the information that you need. But I think we should go through an entire cycle, see how board members complete the feedback form, and then I think we can make some judgments based upon that. I think it's too early to tell.
All right, thank you.
That's great. Anyone else? Hey, Corey.
Just want to say thank you, Dr. Himlin, for your continued commitment to this district. I've been kind of mulling over how to question or ask my question related to focus area 2. You did a nice job explaining some of your examples of some of the concerns and challenges with coaching and workload. And I wanted to ask you a question particularly around coaching. You gave some examples about the administrative staff, which again, thank you for putting more on your plate and working on delegating. I know that's a work in progress for you. But with regard to the teaching staff, what opportunities can you share with respect to privacy of some coaching opportunities or coaching experiences you've had in the first 3 months of the year? Because, excuse me, as we know, it's been a significant change from last year in a lot of the buildings.
Yeah, I think that while I certainly do more coaching in that area on the spot, right? I start every day at a school building, so I have an opportunity to talk with staff every day. Some of that is more impromptu. I would say it's less formal. The more formal part would be through the rounding process. And my responsibility with rounding at the beginning of the year is to round with all of the new teachers. And so I rounded with all 14 new teachers, asking those questions, trying to make sure that we're meeting our expectations of onboarding, right? And it doesn't matter which building you're in, that you're having a similar experience. Would you apply? It's another question we asked to new staff members is, now that you've been here for about 90 days, would you still apply for the job, right? And thankfully people said they would. That's always a good point. And so I think there's a few things that I think the informal coaching is probably the same as it has ever been. The rounding is that same way. And I also from year to year, as we've continued to implement rounding since we've been doing that since 2018 or so. I will have some veteran staff members from time to time who will also ask to sign up to round, and had several of those this year. So I think it's been more frequent, impromptu kinds of pieces. The principals obviously are the ones who are doing more coaching directly of their staff.
Which makes sense, but I know you're in the buildings quite a bit. Related to the 14 new hires, they obviously did not feel the same sense of loss, and it's good to hear that they all would be still interested in applying here. Is there anything you can share with us from any of the feedback from them? Any highlights?
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that. I think that, and this aligns, and again, I'm giving it the summative level, right? And so one of the things that when we finish our rounding segments, all of our administrators who round come together, and we use something that's called the 3-2-1 report. And so we highlight, here are the number of people that I rounded with. here are the 3 themes that I heard most often and things that were going well. Here are the 2 themes of areas that we heard most often and areas for improvement. And what's the one leader action, that we're going to take to address one or more of those areas of improvement. So what I would say overall is when I think about the new staff, almost always we hear the welcoming spirit of the district, that they felt welcomed by their administrator, they felt welcomed by their colleagues, and there's a real appreciation for the amount of support that they've received in this district. Also, heartwarmingly, there's a ton of positive feedback about our students and how our students show up in a very positive way, and that they feel that our students are overall well behaved, that they are engaged and want to be. Of course, this is summer. This doesn't mean everybody every day, but those are the 2 things that come up most often. And then each year, what I would say is that we go back and forth on the area improvements around onboarding. And so this year was the year that we would like to have more training up front. It vacillates where we'd like to have more training, specifically things like Skyward or Student Information System or Schoology or those kinds of things. And then we'll shift and do more of that training. And then next year we'll get feedback that's saying we probably should have less training up front. And so we're always trying to work on how do we thread that needle of how do you bring forward things that are digestible chunks, if you will, for folks as they're onboarding. We had a great suggestion from a staff member this year about that we'll look at using moving forward about some more regular but not required opportunities for new staff to show up and get questions answered. So determining what the next step is, that at the district level, is it at the building level? There's various things. It's process, right? How do I complete my grades? How do I order lunch? And then it's also deeper things like scope and sequence of curriculum. So those would be some of the things that I would say we heard from new staff this year.
Thank you. Claudia, I have one more question.
Okay, yes.
And then related to focus area 5, I sit on the equity advocacy committee, and Daryl did a nice job taking that over from you at the last meeting. You did stop in and provide a few updates as you would be expected to, given your connection with these 3 groups in particular. I'm wondering if this is premature, but you had talked about the Juneteenth event already next year and kind of what's scheduled for that. I think some of that's confirmed, but still in the works. But can you give
Yeah, for sure.
a sense
So
of what's coming ahead?
each year this will be the 3rd Juneteenth. And so this year, what our area of focus will be on is education. And so we are planning to have a panel of Black school leaders from across Minnesota to share their experience and their journey to becoming a school leader. And then a panel discussion about education in Minnesota and specifically how it is meeting the needs of our Black students.
Very good. Thank you.
Anyone else? For sharing. Item C is our policy committee recommendations. And so can you update us on the changes in policies 203, 306, 519, 712, and 722? These will be items for individual action at our January 12th meeting.
Yeah, so I'd refer board members and the public to the table that the policy committee recommendations table. You'll see this is an overview of the policies and the changes that are being recommended. So you'll see there's a mix this time of some things that are part of regular review, and then also items when you see something called substantive, that is typically a recommendation from the School Boards Association, usually based on some kind of legislative change. So in operation of the School Board of Education, the bylaws, there are a couple of changes. We added to section 6.2a to the duties of the vice chair, that the chair could direct the vice chair to basically serve in place of the chair in certain situations. There's also some other just modest updates and some modifications there as well. We're trying to link to policies and statute as appropriate. 306, the Administrator Code of Ethics. This was a substantive change that came through the School Boards Association. Did something, for example, there had been a reference to the National Association of Elementary School Principals statement. That's been removed. So those changes were, again, mostly recommended by the MSBA Policy Services. Interviews of students by outside agencies, that really did focus on some changes, specifically in the area around when students are being interviewed for under the Maltreatment of Minors Act. And so it adjusts what the procedure would be, or the options of where a student might be interviewed, again, really probably for the most significantly for the safety and the privacy of that particular student. So those are the major changes in policy 519. Then when you see policy 712, this is really shifting from the term surveillance. The old policy term was video surveillance. And what you'll see is the most significant changes really adjusting that to being video recording. So you can see the other changes there as well. And then in the public data and data subject requests, this is really related to some updates and from the legislature as well. So those are the 4 policies, excuse me, the 5 policies that we're asking for you're hearing them tonight. And then we'd ask you to approve them at the first meeting in January. I do want to point out there's also several policies that are in the consent grouping tonight. And all of those are non-substantive changes. So you'll see a few of those policies actually are just adding resource sections in various policies, or it's links or statutory reference updates. And the board has previously said that those kinds of policy changes can come forward in the consent grouping. So trying to be efficient with time, those are the overviews of the policy changes that are being recommended. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Questions, comments? Hey, Corey.
I have one question concerning policy 519. So in the table, it says the addition to section 3A, that kind of long sentence.
Yep.
Was statutorily. Do you know if that's verbatim or, because I'm curious, because before it stopped after hours and it was added as or, and it's a very long, confusingly written sentence. I'm curious. I didn't have time to look to see if it was
Yeah, I'd have
statute
to,
specific.
yeah, off the cuff, Corey, I can't tell you if it's specifically, I'm looking to Kelly to see if she's got that. Yeah, so
It reads like statute, but I was just kind of curious about where it was cut off before to where it is now. I don't have a problem with the way it's presented. I was kind of curious about the process of moving to this space.
we'll validate that and be able to bring that back to the January meeting. We don't want to speculate off the
Sure.
cuff, but we agree with you. A lot of these changes are directly from statute. And, you know, as being a former policy committee member, we're very thoughtful about changing any language in policy that is directly from statute.
Thank you.
Okay, Maggie.
As a policy committee member, I want to say that we missed a typo in policy 203, number 3, letter C. It says world's best workforce, and I believe that's changed to the comprehensive and civic readiness.
Good catch.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you for that update. Item D is our fiscal year 2025 audit results and presentation. We welcome Luke Gredden with Clifton Larson Allen LLP to present the results of the 24-25 fiscal year audit. There, you are able to request a copy of the full audit. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. You guys hear me okay? Close enough? Okay. Yeah, my name is Luke Graydon, principal here at CLA. I office out of our Rochester, Minnesota office. Been at CLA for about 11 years. Been working in the school district industry that entire time, my entire career, essentially. Been working with Northfield, I think, pretty much those entire 11 years, but this is my first year as, you know, presenting to you guys, at least at this portion of the board meeting. So happy to be here to present to you guys. I'll kind of go through a little bit of our audit summary and results and some of the numbers, and then let you guys get back to the rest of your meeting. So let me see if I can figure this guy out. Oh, yeah. Okay. So first, just kind of right off the bat. So we haven't actually officially issued the financial statements quite yet. So we're close. We'll most likely be issuing it this week. We had, you know, really the main thing that kind of slowed us down quite a bit was the government. They, as you know, had a shutdown. And as part of your audit, you need a single audit, which is a compliance-based audit. And I'll touch on that a little bit more in a second. But the government needs to release a document essentially that kind of details out what compliance areas we need to test as part of that single audit. Usually they release that like June, July. This year we got it about 2 weeks ago. So a little bit of a difference. And so that kind of slowed down a lot of our audits, as you can imagine. So we did get it though. And so we are just kind of in the final stages of our review process, and we should be issuing the statements later this week. The numbers I'm presenting here in a little bit are all fund level numbers. They are finalized. That state deadline for those numbers is 11/30. And so all of those numbers have been submitted. both on Val's side and our side, and our final and will not change. And so really, again, we're just kind of crossing T's, dotting I's in the end to get it issued. But again, we're confident in, the numbers that we're presenting tonight. So, all right. So with that said, when we do issue that later this week, we'll be issuing what's known as a clean audit opinion. It just means the financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects. No internal control over financial reporting findings or really any financial reporting findings of any kind. And so, basically just as clean of an audit as you can get. As we go through our audit, we look at a number of compliance areas as well, both on the Yellow Book governmental side as well as the Minnesota legal compliance side. The state kind of gives us a laundry list of items we kind of have to go through, and we didn't have any issues, concerns, or findings on that side either. And so I can just note that this is the 7th, I believe, consecutive year of a clean audit, no findings, no issues, no concerns, all those good things. So the cleanest audit report you can get. Certainly not something you see a lot. I think I looked at a few. I think there's only one other audit that we work with that has had even 5 years in a row of such a thing. And that goes with the single audit too. I can go to the next slide. So that I'm including the single audit in that as well, which is more impressive in the fact just because that speaks to not only Val, who obviously does an amazing job, but on the single audit side, you're kind of bringing in different people as well into what we're testing, because we're looking at different programs, either, whether it be title, special education, child nutrition. So there's other, employees and controls in place for those programs that we're also kind of including in our testing. So, we're changing that up essentially every year based on what areas we need to test. And so that's, just a testament to the district's controls overall and not just the amazing work that Val does. So, so for the single audit, we just had to test the child nutrition program this year. So a super clean process. Everything went really well. Didn't have any issues or concerns there at all. So current year changes that we had, the compensated absences is a new GASB standard that they released that we had to adapt this year. Kind of changed just a little bit how we had to calculate and then present a liability for compensated absences. However, that's only on the government-wide statements. It's an estimate that we just had to adjust the calculation for a little bit. However, it doesn't affect any of the fund level numbers that we're looking at, which is kind of what the district is actually working with on the fund level side. So not a huge concern, just kind of, we had to basically change a little bit of the wording and some of the disclosures along with that in the statements. And then there is one other piece I don't have listed on here. When we get the issued statements, and Val has a draft now, but the governmental funds, we used to show them all as the separate columns on the face of the statements. We now have food service and community service are basically, due to kind of new presentation standards, considered non-major funds, just because the size of them compared to the general fund is minimal, right? Just overall. So they're just listed in one column combined, just titled non-major funds. They are still split up in a different statement towards the back of the financial statements. So if you want to see all that, it's all there. It's just presented a little bit differently. It's really just a compliance type of thing that we had to kind of adjust for. So really nothing changed. Nothing really changes as far as what you see, and certainly not the numbers, but just a presentation thing I wanted to note that we changed. All right, with that said, we'll get into some of the numbers here. So first slide here is just kind of an overarching, summary of what went on in the general fund this year, which obviously, again, is kind of the biggest piece of the pie as far as district activity, right? So you can kind of see at the top your overall revenues, and then expenditures, your changes in fund balance, and then fund balances at the end of last year and now at the end of this year. So a few different columns there. That first one, essentially your unassigned fund balance, and we'll see that separately in a second, as well as assigned and non-spendable. And then you have those non-capital restrictions and then those capital restrictions. The restrictions are all revenue coming in from the state that has to be used for specific purposes. So a majority of that state revenue will come in, and then, a lot of it gets pegged for, different programs, whether it be operating capital, long-term facilities maintenance, basic skills, whatever it may be. And so that's what that funding is. It's just dollars left over there to be spent for those purposes in future years. So again, you can kind of see the overall revenue expense. We'll kind of get into them in detail in the future, in the next few slides coming up. But just again, the overall what's going on in the general fund. Overall, you can see about a 2.6 million over on the right there, 2.6 million increase in the general fund. That's essentially all stemming from revenue being about 2.6 million over budget. A lot of that, about 1.6 million of it, is due to kind of some one-time uncommon revenue that kind of came in essentially a little bit early, and not unexpected, but just kind of off timeline, I guess is a better way to put it. And so that's not something that's going to be repeated. It's kind of more of a one-time, again, uncommon thing that came through. So you kind of drove that revenue up a little bit higher this one year than what it normally would have. But overall, a good year, as far as that is concerned. And overall, you can see that fund balance going from that 14.5 to 17.2 million. And we'll kind of get into a few of the details here in the coming slides. So this one is your general fund revenue. So overall, 70.4 million of general fund revenue, just kind of showing where that revenue is coming from. So there's a few minor ones there at federal, 1.5% down a little bit. Part of that is due to that kind of uncommon funding kind of shifting about 600,000 from federal into state. I won't get into the details there, but the main two pieces there, obviously your property tax is 26%. And then of course, by far the biggest piece of that pie, state at 68.5%. So your state revenue up about 3 million from last year. And then again, overall revenue up about 5.3 million from last year. Again, about 1.6 of that being kind of, that one time uncommon type increases. Then your general fund expenditures, just under 68 million in total. This slide's got a little bit going on, but the big pie chart on the left is kind of showing you that overall 68 million. The smaller pieces there are essentially your overhead. So you got your admin and district support costs, you have sites and buildings, capital expenditures, all those kind of things. That 81.9, I'm going to say 82% is the rest of it. And all of that is essentially these expenditures going directly to the instruction of the student. So you can see that split out over on the right. Obviously, regular instruction is the biggest piece at 46.5%, special education at 21%, and you can see the other ones there as well. So 82%, that's super good, high number. Basically, putting every dollar you can towards the instruction of the students, keeping essentially your overhead costs as low as you really possibly can. And again, putting money towards the instruction of the students. And then just a point on the budget side of things here, essentially spot on budget. The number is too small for me to mention. So great job by Val and the team, just kind of hitting, a simple $68 million budget, basically spot on. So it's pretty good to see there, to kind of hang your hat on. So that's good to see. All right, so this is going back into the unassigned fund balance from the general fund. This is in the thousands, so it's about 10.2 million. This year at year end, it was about 8.3 last year. So that revenue increase that we talked about, most of that being that one-time thing. Basically, you can see most of that increase hitting here, getting you to that 10.2 million. So overall, obviously, a healthy unassigned fund balance. But again, some of that funding won't continue. We will see in a little bit there too. We have those ADMs decreasing a little bit as well, which kind of is, driving that state revenue of that 69%. And so, it's a good number. You want to, be watching that as well. And so we'll see that here in a minute, but I'm going to go into a few of your other funds. So your food service fund balance, super healthy food service fund balance. You've been kind of teetering up and above and below, 1 million, but really healthy fund balance, 960,000 this year. It's been, basically really high ever since COVID. There's been a ton of shifts in the funding for this fund. We've had, with COVID, you had a lot of federal dollars coming in and supporting it that way. And then now the state kind of has shifted with meals served and everything. So a lot of changes there, which has caused fund balances in this fund to go up across the board. Every district I work with, the graph is in some ways like this, where it's going up year after year, and just much higher. When you look in the 2010s, it's there no comparison. So very healthy fund balance. Overall, you guys had budgeted to spend down about 230,000, ended up spending down about 50,000. So super healthy fund balance in the food service fund. And then your community education fund balance. Also a very healthy fund balance, just under 700,000 this year. Had budgeted to spend down about 160,000, but actually spent down about 40,000. So good results here. Revenue and expense both up about 300,000. So operationally, it's kind of doing what this fund you want to be doing. You want it. You want the community service fund to kind of operate as its own business, essentially. Hopefully, kind of can support itself. And you can see again with expenses going up, revenue kind of going up with it. So you can see that kind of in action and keeping that fund balance above 700 over the last 4 years. So it's good to see. All right, so this is your 5-year enrollment trend. You can see the splits between the grades, but just obviously total numbers at the top. Overall, you guys have been relatively steady in that 3.8 over the last 4 years. However, it did see about a 90 ADM or students served decrease from 24 to 25. And that's not unexpected, but obviously it is a pretty big drop. And again, that does really drive the entirety of your state revenue, which is about 70% of your total general fund revenue. So super big, data point that you want to keep an eye on. And I know, just kind of projecting out, I know there are, projections to kind of see, some enrollment decreases over the next 5 years as well. And I will say too, it's super common. Really I guess most districts we work with, we see pretty big ADM decreases, if not every year, every other year. Birth rates are down across the board in Minnesota and really everywhere. But districts across the state are seeing ADMs decrease in some cases, a lot more rapidly than, a decrease like this. So there is, it's not an uncommon thing that we're seeing as we go through, our various audits throughout the year. So. But something certainly worth noting. That's no doubt about that. So, all right. So our last 3 slides here. So a little bit going on these, but the dark blue is essentially a 5-year trend for the district, and then the light blue and the light yellow are similar size district average and then state average. And just to note, those averages, those years are correct. So those averages are a year behind. So when you're comparing, you want to look at the 2024 columns, not the 2025. So this is cost per student served. So we're looking at total costs in a few key areas within the general fund, and then comparing that to that student served number that we just saw. And so you can see this is basically all of your admin district support services. Costs, have gone up a little bit over the last few years. This year, you saw a little bit of a jump, about 300,000 in increase in cost. About half of that is just kind of regular salary increases, benefits, things like that. The other half, about 150,000 or so, was actually some severance payouts you guys had for 2 different directors and a principal. So essentially some one-time expenses that kind of came out that really drove this up quite a bit more than it was. And if you look back in 2022, you actually had a similar situation. There was about 50, 60,000 or something like that of severance payouts in 2022. And so if you take out all that severance, then this graph is pretty steady, increasing about 40 to 50 or 30 to 40, kind of per year on a per student basis, which is kind of as you would expect, right? Wages are going up and costs of everything is going up. And so kind of more natural progression of an increase there. But again, and just looking, even with those sometimes bigger increases, obviously, when you're looking at 2024, certainly well under those similar size district averages and in the state as well. So on the flip side, regular instruction, well over those averages. And this is the area you want to be over, right? So you're spending, and we kind of saw that in the pie chart too, at that 82%, but you're spending, quite a bit more than, your similar size districts on a per student basis, which means to me that you're putting money towards the instruction of the students as best that you can. So overall in this regular instruction of the students had about a 1.2 million increase in expenses here. Most of that just salary increases with the teachers and everything like that. There was some supplies and other things as well. There was also the voluntary pre-K program was approved this year. So there's about 150,000 extra added in from that as well. And so again, seeing those costs increase, that average jumped up quite a bit from last year. Again, costs went up. Also, those ADMs dropping 90 does drive that average up a little bit as well. But again, this is kind of the area you want to be higher than your peers if you're going to be higher. So, and kind of really the same exact graph, just lesser numbers on this one. So special education cost, These costs are also, kind of always going up. Salaries, wages increase. We had about a $750,000 increase in these costs this year. These costs special education costs have been rising quite rapidly in the districts that I've seen over the last 5 years. And so you see that here, you see that jumping up. But again, putting money towards the instruction of the students in this area here as well. So that's good to see as well. All right. Yeah, so that's my last slide. Again, just want to say, thanks for having me. Thanks for being flexible. I had another board meeting I had to get to, so I'm glad you guys had some other things on the agenda for me so I could get here in time, no problem. And, just appreciate working with Val and the team. Everybody does a great job, and we love working with you guys. So thank you. And any questions for me?
Excellent. Thank you for the report.
Mhm.
Board members, do you have any comments or questions? Okay, good.
Luke, thank you. Appreciate it over here.
Yeah.
So, I think 7 clean audits in a row. I think if we're going to use a sports term, that'd be a dynasty, right? Getting there. So when we, and I think that speaks well to Val's work and obviously kind of the priority that the administration puts on making sure that the dollars get to the classroom and that
Mhm.
we're as efficient as we can be, certainly at the administration level. And we love a great story and we look forward to an 8th clean audit next year. But when you look at districts kind of where they get tripped up in certain areas, I think it's always good to try to look around the corner. What are some of the areas that you see as kind of challenges in this space?
Sure. So I would say, the biggest challenge that a lot of the districts I work with, and I'll say, in a lot of cases, they're smaller than Northfield, right? Like student wise. And, but the biggest issue that some of them that are in maybe some concerning places right now that they're dealing with is expenses. Expenses are rising, right? And so it's hard to deal with that. And then you have ADMs decreasing, so that is a hard combo. And then having to make tough decisions is a really hard thing. And in some cases, the ones that are, I would say, in the worst positions, there was COVID funding, and that kind of drove some people to obviously had additional positions, which is great and all those things. And then some people held on a little bit too long on some of that when, maybe they weren't suited to or weren't in a position to. And so kind of those expenses dragged on. And then that all of a sudden your unassigned fund balance is at 2% of your total expenses, which is really bad. Yeah. So, we've seen that in a few cases. And so that's probably, really the biggest thing is just, keeping control of expenses and budgeting and just, watching that because, if students are decreasing and with the changes in funding and, it's not keeping up in a lot of cases, in most cases. And so just kind of keeping tabs on that, I would say is the biggest thing that I've seen that we're seeing right now.
Were you, I just want to make sure that we answered your question, but were you implying what trips up in terms of audit findings or just in general financial control?
Yeah, I was curious about audit findings.
Oh,
but
okay.
I'm glad that
Yeah.
you
So
talked about
yeah, on the audit finding
stewardship
side.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. So the audit finding side, I mean, on the compliance side, it's a lot of, sometimes it's just simple things. And sometimes for some of our really small districts, it's sometimes just lack of people, right? Like they, you guys are obviously fortunate to have a large district and you have Val who's great, but also you have people under Val. Some don't have that. And so that's one thing where it's like, oh, we don't deal with our outstanding checks in time. And those are types of compliance type findings. On the single audit piece, again, it's really just the controls there. And so you guys have, departments, you have a child nutrition department and stuff. And some, again, any district that we work with that has that, they're usually pretty good at keeping those compliance areas up to snuff and, keeping those controls operating. Where they get into trouble is when you have to cut a position or something like that. And then you don't have those proper controls in place. On the financial side, the one finding that we give to I would say 75% of our districts is basically just over the financial reporting process, which basically essentially just means that, the people in Val's position just don't have the right or the proper skills and kind of expertise to essentially go through, review the statements and give me edits in a way that they understand, like, and not just the numbers, but then all the notes. So, that this report's 120 pages long or whatever it is, right? And like 40 pages of that is a bunch of notes and words. And most of my clients will, read through them, but they're really just looking at the numbers and the graphs and stuff. Val reads through it all. She sent me a whole email of edits over the weekend. And then my puppy woke up at 4 a.m. and I changed him on Saturday morning and we were good. But so that, that expertise, that's the reason that you don't get that finding. And that's the finding, for a lot of my districts, they just have the one finding most years in a good year. And it's that one. You guys don't have that one because Val knows what she's doing in that sense. And so she can go in and has that expertise to review those statements. And if there's anything that we're missing or just simply, kind of throughout the board, then, she's catching that. And so it's kind of that extra level of review and essentially taking responsibility for them when a lot of our other clients don't. So that's kind of that one. Beyond that, again, it's really control. So having those proper controls in place is the main thing, and Northfield does a really good job of that. So hopefully that answers that part of it better. Thank you, Val.
No, and I appreciate that. I think given in the news lately, there's been concerns just about government accounting, and being responsible with the resources that government gets and has. I think this does certainly speak well. Again, 7th year of a clean audit, but that we do have those strong systems in place, but certainly not to take those for granted either. I think that's what I hear from you. So.
Yes, absolutely.
And I want to just add to that. I think the important part is number one, Val ensures that the finance department lives by the strategic plan, right? So we take the strategic commitment to stewardship very seriously. And it isn't just, the key thing is that Val not only does the oversight, but I think something that sets our finance department apart is the amount of training that is done. So a small but mighty finance team in the district office, but also there's annual training that Val does for all of the administrative assistants in the building, because I think that over the years, we've seen the systems become even stronger because of that year over year. It's not like, oh, we did that already. Every year we go back to the basics and we retrain to make sure that people know what the systems are, know what the processes are. And if they're concerned or they're not sure, don't just, call Val or call the district office folks to be able to help that. So I think you said it at the end. It's really been a development of a system that starts with the board and the strategic plan guidance on stewardship, and then the relentless training and oversight that Val has provided to make sure that we're seeing around those corners that you brought up. But I think it's important to talk about the training.
Okay, Corey, and then Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Luke. Just one question for you concerning the single audit.
Mhm.
And thanks for turning that around given the significant delay that you all experienced. How is it decided which program is being tested? Is that something
Sure.
driven by CLA or is that something the government?
So
Correct.
there's government standards, and so basically we look at the total federal expenditures that you have. I believe it was like 2.8 million. Yeah, 2.8 million this year. And there is, so first of all, there's a threshold of, do you need a single audit? That's 750,000. So obviously you're always going to be in that bucket of needing a single audit. It is actually increasing to $1 million, but still going to be in that bucket. And so that's the same threshold for what's called a type A program. And so if a program is above that type A, then that is a program that has to be tested essentially every 3 years. And so if, we have a Excel spreadsheet that's super complicated, that's in place based on those standards that, if we type in all the numbers and put in all the federal expenditures and then look at the programs, if there's any type A programs, we see if we've tested them over the last 2 years. If not, then we have to test that program. Beyond that, if there's a type B program, which is kind of in the middle, like 350, 375,000 or under 750, we may have to test them, but only if they are considered a high risk program, which generally doesn't happen. But sometimes the government, like when COVID came out with all those extra programs, those were considered high risk by the government. And so that caused us to have to automatically test a bunch of those programs because they were large and because they considered them high risk. So, but to kind of summarize, so then because of the perfect audit report that you guys have had over a number of years, you are considered a low risk auditee. So we have to hit a certain threshold, essentially 20% of your overall But in the end, we're basically looking at that type A. And so child nutrition is really always going to be the highest one. You obviously have a lot of dollars coming through there. And then, special education, Title I, those are kind of the big three for Minnesota school districts, really school districts in general. So I think last year, I know we tested 2 last year. I can't remember if it was, I want to say it was special ed. Yeah, I think it was special education and then a COVID program that we tested last year. So we have to hit a certain percentage, but then we also have to make sure that we're testing any of those main programs that are over that threshold at least every so often. Obviously, there's a few programs that are much smaller that are under 250,000 or something like that. Those we wouldn't generally test. So
And you mentioned the single audit threshold increase to 2 million.
what 1 million?
1 million.
Yes,
Okay, I
yeah.
misheard that.
Yeah.
Is that a change under OBBBA?
Yeah. Yes. Yep. And that's effective for next audit season. It's effective for audits starting 12/31/2025 and then beyond. So
Thank you.
All right, Jeff?
Yeah, thanks, Luke, for coming to Northfield and your
Mhm.
presentation. I had kind of an open question for you, and I was thinking because we are a rural district, but we have the benefit of being right next to a major metropolitan area. I'm just thinking of the other school districts, the smaller school districts, and over the years, we've seen a lot of consolidation of smaller school districts. Are you seeing that go on? And then maybe, how can, in the future, or what you're seeing now, if there's any trends of more consolidation, or how do we help I don't know how do we help, but how do these the rural small districts
Yeah.
survive?
Yeah. That's a good question. I ask that myself sometimes. I went to school in Lewis and Altura High School down in kind of like I went in Winona County, if you know anywhere that is. I live in St. Charles, Minnesota, both of which are St. Charles is more of a mid-size, I guess, still on the smaller side though, and then Lewiston's really small and frankly struggling as far as numbers, right? And so it's kind of close to home for me. But anyways, we haven't seen any of our districts, at least haven't heard of any of them like looking into consolidation just over the last few years. But it's something that, as you project forward over the next 5 to 10 with where everything is going, you could definitely see it. I've seen a few districts just in the past few years, the smaller ones, where they combined a long time ago, like my home district, Lewis and Altura, where I went to high school, Lewiston and Altura, right? So then, but they had like an elementary, a high school, and then an intermediate building, right? And so they sold one of the buildings, I think the intermediate one, 2 years ago, because just they didn't need the space, less students, right? And so we've seen a number, actually, I want to say like 3 or 4 just in the last 2 years, essentially sell a building because they're like, okay, let's cut down on admin costs, cut down on utility costs, just kind of do anything we can in that sense to save. And then, the other thing we see, some of them having to do is, maybe combining principal roles. Like if you maybe only have one principal for the whole district, and those are hard things to do. It makes the jobs harder and hard, again, just kind of goes back to those hard decisions too. So that's some of the things we're seeing. But yeah, it's hard. And there's some that are really small that are like, it seems like we're going to have to combine, but they're getting further away from each other, because some of them have combined, like you said. So then it's like, it's hard to, and where do you go and what students have to bus where? And imagine the hurt feelings that you'd have between the cities. And so I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what the next 5 to 10 years say, but it's definitely something that, we look at a lot and talk through, and haven't heard any rumblings of actual, districts combining right now, but definitely something I could see going on in the future.
Thanks for your thoughts.
Yeah.
Amy?
I have a couple of comments and a question. First, I just want to thank you, Luke, for being here and for such a well laid out and clear presentation. Thank you very much. We always enjoy seeing you and people from your group here.
Thank you. Thank you.
My other thing I wanted to say, a comment was, I loved Ben's dynasty metaphor, and I want to add my own sports metaphor to it because I had the fun of living in Chicago during the 90s when the Bulls were at their peak. And so they won the championship, and then they had a repeat win, and then they had a third win, and everyone called it a three-peat.
Mhm.
And then their fourth win was a four-peat. So using that metaphor, we've just had a seven-peat. We outdid the Bulls of Chicago at the peak of their time. And I just want to thank you, Val, and your whole team. Please let them know that we really appreciate their diligence and effort to make this happen for our district. In fact, I'm going to ask, can we give them a round of applause? So thank you for that. And then my question is more kind of a thought question. I'm just looking at our regular instruction costs per student, and thank you to our community, the Northfield School District, for all of the additional levies that they've allowed that give us the additional money that we have to spend on the food students. And I look at this and I'm just amazed to see that, we're averaging $1,800 or so more than schools of about the same size per student, and $1,200 more in general of the average. So then I think that's just the average. That means that there are schools below the average too, and I don't know how they're surviving. And I'm sure it's without music and art and many other of the wonderful offerings that we are able to provide our students, which back when I was younger were considered standard,
Mhm.
and now they're considered optional.
Yeah.
So, but my question for you is, looking at the, whatever year you want to, the 7704 for 2024, 8312 for 2025. What school districts have sort of an equivalent amount that they're spending per student? And I know I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but do you have a sense of sort of where?
So
we aligned with?
I would say that Owatonna has a relatively I can't remember exactly what their number is over the last few years, but it's similar. I would say it's within 1,000 plus or minus, or 500 plus or minus. So I'd say that's a comp that I work with that is kind of relatively the same size, and kind of just the spending is that your 82% of your total to the instruction, they're right around that same percentage too. So if that probably answers it better than that, is you're kind of in that same percentage realm of total spending, and students are relatively similar. I don't know exactly, but that's probably the closest comp that I can think of, just in my experience, I guess, the districts that I work with.
How does it, and maybe you can't answer because you might not work with these districts, but do you work with like Edina and Minnetonka and those districts?
CLA does. I do not, however. So we have a Minneapolis office, and so they work with most of those. So I don't know off the top of my head.
fair
Sorry. But I would, yeah, I mean, I would venture to guess that they have to spend at least as much, if not more, just because they're in the cities. But maybe not. I don't know. But yeah, I don't work with any of the ones in the cities or kind of in the surrounding area. So
Okay. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Luke, for being here.
Yeah.
It's just so valuable to hear a expert third party tell us what we already knew, that Val is a star.
Yeah,
Thank you so
absolutely.
much.
Yeah, thank you guys very much. Have a good rest of your meeting, and
Could I just make a couple comments? So I just wanted to, obviously Luke already highlighted that this was slightly different than what you've seen historically, being a draft. And I just wanted, again, we're very confident in the numbers, but just to know if anything did materially change after approval, we would bring it back, of course, for transparency, just to make sure everyone was aware of it. It will also go, it gets published on our website, so you'll see it there. And then we will also publish it in the January packet as a item for information, just so the final draft is out there and available. And I also just want to specifically shout out Stephanie Strummy and Aaron Bailey. So they manage the Child Nutrition Fund and the Community Services Fund, and they are both incredibly diligent in managing their budgets, and ensuring that their funds are balanced and not negatively impacting the general fund. And really, I consider them a model of what our commitment to strategic strategic commitment to stewardship should look like. So I just wanted to publicly say that because they do a tremendous job. So, and I will make sure that we provide the board the full data from the state on, so you can see all the districts and where they rank on.
I was gonna
the
say, 'cause
things
that data is out there, so.
that is available, and we can make sure to share that. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Luke.
Okay, thank you, guys.
All right, item 6 is our consent agenda, and as a reminder, there were some personnel items in the table file added to that consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping for separate consideration? Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping?
Second.
Thank you, Corey. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. All right, item 7 is our items for individual action, and we have 3 items. First, we have the certification of the final 2025 payable 2026 tax levy. I will take a motion first, and we can discuss. Is there a motion to certify to county auditors the 2025 payable 2026 final certified levy limitation and certification report as presented? Okay, thank you, Amy. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Maggie. Is there any discussion at this time? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Right, motion passes. Item B is the 26-27 school year calendar. I'll take a motion first. Is there a motion to approve the 2026-2027 school calendar as presented?
I move that we approve it.
Thank you, Corey. Is there a second? Thank you, Ben. All right, Dr. Hillman, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I got a little bit of feedback from people in the community and then working with the association to get feedback as well. We are gonna, as we move forward to the 27-28 calendar, we're gonna redo the timeline and you'll likely see a 27-28 calendar fairly soon. And we're gonna identify points where people can give feedback. The limited feedback that I got from the public was really asking the question why we weren't starting before Labor Day, when this is one of the years where the legislature does allow you to start before Labor Day because it's so late. And just as a history lesson, a decade or so ago, a little more than a decade ago, the community had a real significant discussion about starting school before Labor Day. And it was very clear from the stakeholders in the community that they wanted to keep the post-Labor Day start, really related to the scheduled starts for the 2 colleges. And then also really for the robust participation that many of our students have with the state fair. And that was before we had FFA, right? So I understand, when you start after Labor Day, we're going to go further into June. That's just the way that the calendar works. But I did want to lift up that feedback and understand that that was a point of contention. And then bring back some additional input opportunities as we get a 27-28 calendar out. We're going to try to get back into that cycle that we were in pre-COVID of having a calendar approved 2 years out. So I want to acknowledge that feedback that we had received, but again, there's limited ways that you can slice and dice a calendar that starts, after Labor Day when Labor Day is so late.
Okay, fair. Okay, Corey?
Yeah, I just wanted to express my gratitude to the members who serve on Meet and Confer, including administration and the NEA union members, because this is a tricky conversation that you're not going to please everybody. And in front of us, we have draft 6, and I'm sure it's really draft 16. There's a lot of changes that go on and a lot of conversations and ideas thrown against the wall because one little change here affects 2 things elsewhere. So I know it's a lot of work to get to this point. So just thanks to all who were involved. And as someone who's been on that committee before, I know those are not easy conversations.
Anyone else? Comment, question? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Item C is our high school request for an FTE. Is there a motion to approve the request to add 0.40 FTE at the high school for the second semester of this school year at the cost of $15,165?
I move.
Okay, Corey, and second? Sure. Ben. All right. Are there any questions or comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that that number is increased. So that's stated in the increase is that everybody knew that it has been increased.
The numbers changed, right, based on the conversation we had at the last meeting. Val, do you want to
So I'm just saying, as long as all the board members are aware of that and they're okay with it, I'm fine with it.
Yes, the amount presented was basically half. I halved it twice since it was for a half year. So it's 15,000, I think 7,000-ish was presented at the last meeting.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Item 8 is the items for information, and we have an enrollment report for the December 2025. Really?
Yeah, so you'll see in the enrollment report, and I'm not able to project tonight. Normally I would plug it in and project, but just it's not connecting. So you will see that not only is Val within 0.8% of a $67 million budget this month, her projection is dead on for enrollment. So now that is a decrease, right, of we had been up 11 over projection last month. Not atypical this time of the year to start seeing some shifts specifically at the high school. So while you'll see some students who will shift to the ALC, they're still counted, as our overall enrollment numbers. You'll see some students who will go to the Big Nine online. Again, they're included in our overall enrollment numbers. But we have seen a few students move out of state. We've also seen some students who have enrolled at SevSec. And when they enroll at SevSec, they actually are, even though they're district residents, they're counted on the SevSec enrollment. And then we've also seen some students who enter a treatment program, they tend to be reported through that treatment program's educational component during that period of time. So when you see that we're now right at the projection after being above for the last several months, that's the explanation as to why we're there today.
Thank you. Questions or comments on the enrollment report? Right, none at this time. Item B is our construction update number 20. Would you like to add any comments or leave it as is?
Yep, I'll let it stand. Very similar to last month. Be happy to answer any questions that board members might have.
Questions or comments? Okay, Amy.
Just wondering when the next steps are that the board will be involved?
Yeah, so the next steps when the board will be involved will likely be the bid process. So you'll get another report. I believe we've got it scheduled for the first meeting in February, second meeting in January. So you'll get another report from Wold, the second meeting in January. It'll give you an update on the design development, the construction documents, their continued costing, right? They do several checkpoints on here's what we think if we were to bid it today, here's what we think it would come in at. They'll share with you some of the adjustments that we've made based upon those projections. So you'll hear a full report from Sal Bagley and from Knutson Construction, second meeting in January 2026. You'll see the bids will be released in February of 2026, and then we'll ask you to award them. And we're right now targeting early April of 2026.
Do we have to approve a final design?
I do not believe that you've approved a final design in the
But
past.
in the past, we haven't done. I thought we did for Greenvale.
We'll go back and double check on that, but I believe that we've empowered that team to be able to put those things forward.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Item 9 is our future meetings. Those are Monday, December 15th, a work session on the topic of later school start times. Monday, January 12th is our organizational meeting, followed by a regular meeting. Then Monday, January 26th, a regular board meeting. Those are here in the district boardroom. And Thursday, January 29th, 5 p.m., a work session on the topic of later school start times.
Can I make a comment on that too?
Yes, please.
So I just want to make sure that the public knows, in the board packet, I did put the timeline for the later school start time discussion. So we're really starting to kick this off. I want to be really clear that when you look at the timeline, we're not talking about any kind of change for next year or even potentially the year after. Board members had asked is for us to have a discussion about the possibility of aligning our middle school and high school start times with what the research says and the associated health benefits. And so we're starting off with that at December 15th. We'll have Dr. Kyla Wallstrom from the University of Minnesota joining us remotely. Just as a reminder, work sessions are open to the public, but we do not record them. So just want people to know that we're in a different setup so that board members can have a real solid discussion. You'll remember that from our work sessions related to the budget. But I know that this is something that people have an interest in, so I want to make sure I point to people in the board packet that you can see the entire planned discussion timeframe and would be able to provide feedback, at any time throughout that. We've got some intentionally built-in events for the community to give feedback. But I know that when people first hear this, when you start talking about your morning start time, I know that there's going to be people who have want to be able to know more and be able to engage in that process. And that's why this is unusual for us to put a document in with upcoming meetings. But we want to make sure that we're as transparent as we can so that people know that this is coming and can lend their voice to the process as well.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Okay. That's all the business that we have for tonight. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Amy. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.